What's safer, Apple or Windows? How does one famous Windows software developer answer this question? What is Gatekeeper? Hmm. What is Patch Tuesday? What security feature does Windows have that Makani wishes Apple did too? I'm super intrigued about that one. Apple, take note. Makani has some wishes for you. Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Nick, and this is Super Simple Security Principles. Listen each week and learn how to protect yourself online, no matter your skill level. This is episode 34. 34. Apple versus Windows. It's our third and final episode of answers to a question from one of our listeners, Matt. Shout out to Matt.
Definitely.
All right. Makani, welcome in, buddy. Our Master
Hey,
Guardian's here to teach us. Yes.
yeah, I'm just laughing because it's just still funny to me that it's taken me 3 episodes to answer his question. But
No, that's
hey,
just
that's the
typical.
way I
I love
roll.
it.
So yeah, which is good. It just means, but I am excited to get to our next listener's question too. Have you talked to her, by the way? If we can say her name?
Yeah, we can. Let's give her a shout out.
Okay,
Go for it.
sweet. Melissa, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, cool. And she's the one we referenced last week, actually in 33 about the cookie. So we'll be talking about what is a cookie.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that one too, and we'll see how many parts it has.
Wait.
Yeah.
The cookie question is Trisha.
Oh, Trisha. Okay. Oh, right. Melissa's the uh, filtering and keeping your whole internet safe. Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good catch. We
Yep.
got a couple in the
We've
pipeline that we're working on. So
we do. Yeah.
yep.
Which we're
So
super pumped about. So if you
oh,
have episodes you'd love to hear, we would love to hear from you. If there's episodes or questions you have, shout us out on the forum so that we can have some more episodes.
yeah, I agree. Could not be happier about that. It's my favorite
Yeah.
thing when I have. I like teaching you too, but I like having a specific listener as well that we're teaching.
Yeah.
So this is a follow up to, I believe it was episode 29, where we talked about Apple versus Android.
Yeah.
And so we're going to follow kind of the same pattern, try to keep it kind of familiar and, apples to apples, whatever, as much as we can. No pun intended there. I realize apples, yes, there are lots of apples everywhere. But the threat we focused on in that episode was malware.
Yes.
And we're going to do that again. And malware, in case you haven't listened to that episode, real quickly, is just harmful or malicious, that's the mal part, software that we either unknowingly install or accidentally or install but without realizing it's malware, or sometimes it sneaks on there. But the
Gotcha.
difference today is we're going to be changing the type of device we compare. Last time it was phones, hence Apple or iPhone versus Android. And this time it's going to be laptops and desktops.
Okay.
And so when I say Apple, I'll use it kind of interchangeably with Mac OS because that's the operating system that runs on laptops and desktops that are built by Apple. And that's what is directly comparable to Windows. It's Mac OS from Apple and Windows from Microsoft. But we're going to mostly talk about it as Apple versus Windows. Does that
I
make sense?
prefer that. Oh yeah, it makes sense and it seems simpler to me. I like it. If you say Mac OS, I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's
Apple.
kind of right. It's not super familiar. It just we want to make sure that this one we know the scope. We're not talking about iPhones this time, right? Everything
Right.
today when we talk about Apple, it's going to be Mac OS specific. So that's all.
We're gonna be talking desktop, laptop.
Yep.
Did I get it?
Yep. Exactly. And
Okay.
I know you have at least a Windows laptop. I know you have a Mac laptop.
Mm-hmm.
right? In
Yep.
your house. Okay.
And have a Mac Mini.
Okay. Yeah. Right. And I have a couple Mac Minis. I've got a Mac laptop. I've got a Windows gaming box that I built.
Nice.
We mostly are Apple Mac OS, but I do have the Windows one that I use. I don't know how much I've talked about it, but I play video games pretty regularly with my brothers. So
Nice.
okay, so the first aspect of comparison is and we talked about this last time, and it plays a significant role here too, is sheer popularity.
Yeah.
And the numbers that I found from February of this year, 2024, show that for all laptops and desktops, Windows is about 72%, which, yeah, with Mac OS at about 20%, and the rest are Linux laptops and Chromebooks. So obviously,
Dang.
yeah, over three times Windows, at 72% versus Mac at 20%. So, and common sense would tell us that that probably means that there's far more malware that's just being built for Windows than anything
Right.
else. And I wanted to find some good numbers on that, and I couldn't find anything great. The one report that I thought was worth sharing was it showed that 52% of malware that was found on Windows. 47% was actually found on Linux, which I was quite surprised about.
Wow. Because don't they
Yeah, and
represent like,
I know exactly right. It's super tiny, and so it kind of seems like it goes against the whole popularity thing from that perspective. So I'm not really sure. There's definitely some more investigation to be done there. Um,
uh,
but anyway, it showed 1% on Mac OS. And the Linux anomaly aside, anyway, my feeling still here is that the popularity, and we're not going to have, anyway, it's a factor, right? Windows, we know, is far more common than anything else.
right. Right.
So even again, it's no credit to Apple, but from a certain perspective, Apple wins. Uh, the lack of popularity contest, right?
Right.
Then the next point of comparison, just like last time, is the threat from voluntarily installing malware.
Yeah.
And with Apple and Android, that was all about the app stores. But on a computer, it's a little bit different because there are app stores these days on both Windows and Apple, but most software is still available outside of the App Store, even if it's available on the App Store. And a lot of it's not even on the App Store anyway.
Yeah.
But Mac OS or Apple, Mac OS, and Windows both, they do have things that they've built in to try to help prevent you from installing malware, even if it comes from outside of the App Store.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the way, so there's, we had at the start, what is Gatekeeper? And the Mac
Yeah.
OS approach, that's the feature that they talk about, and you can go search it. We have a link in the show notes, but it's called Gatekeeper. And it's extremely simple and pretty strict, and both simpler and stricter, I would say, in comparison to Windows. And what it does is, anytime you install an app on Mac OS on Apple, if it's outside of the App Store, well, I mean it actually is regardless. But let's see, if you install it from the App Store, then it's already passed that check. So if it's
Gotcha.
outside of the App Store, then it won't let you run it unless Apple has reviewed it and certified it to be safe.
Dang.
Just as though it did come from the App Store.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I horribly
That
mangled
makes
the first part of
sense.
that explanation, but
So let me see if I get it right.
yeah.
So if I download an app from the App Store, it's already passed through Gatekeeper. It's already made its certs because they
Well,
reviewed
and
it,
that's
checked it.
that's where I mangled it, right? In both cases, if it gets submitted to the App Store or if it doesn't, it has to, in order for it to be able to be run, it has to have passed their certification, even if they decide not to put it on the App Store.
Oh, okay. So regardless, every app has to make its way through Gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, they call it differently, and the
Yeah,
certifications might be slightly different to actually go on the App Store versus not. But if it hasn't been reviewed, so for example, say you try to go and download something that
yeah,
hasn't been reviewed and certified by Apple,
right.
right? Because people can do that, and some
Yeah,
of that definitely exists. And if they didn't do that, so there's the three levels. They could put it in the App Store, or they could put it not in the App Store but have it reviewed and certified, or they could just do nothing.
okay.
And if they do nothing, then it just won't run on your Mac unless you go jump through a couple specific hoops to enable those kind of apps to run, which I've had to do. And sometimes as a software developer, there are some things that I have installed. Not very many, but because most of the time they are certified. But um, yeah. So does that make sense now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It,
And they use the gatekeeper. I mean they might. I don't know if they actually say gatekeeper as it applies to the App Store, but because gatekeeper is what is running on your Apple at the time that is like checking it is the idea,
okay.
right? And
Yeah.
so if you downloaded it from the App Store, then it's going to know that it's from the App Store and the gatekeeper will let it run. If you downloaded it outside of the App Store, but it was certified by Apple, then Gatekeeper will say, oh, okay, it can run. So Gatekeeper is the
Okay.
software that's running at the time when you first try to run an application that you've newly installed that checks to see that it's safe.
Gotcha. That was a good explanation.
Yeah, it took a little while to get there. That was, yeah, fumbled around there. So thank you for pushing, making sure we got that clear. Hopefully that's, yeah, came across
Yeah.
now.
Okay. Yes. Now that makes sense. Okay. So I'm a
Well,
fan
and
of Gatekeeper,
yeah.
you know. So it seems like this is a pretty good security feature, right?
Oh yeah, I think it's great. It's fantastic. Well, and here's the part I really like about it most is that it's not like a simple pop-up. Like if you decide you wanted to bypass Gatekeeper, which I don't recommend for our listeners, and it's not a common case. It's not quite as extreme as jailbreaking that we mentioned last time on Apple versus Android. But
Right.
if you did, it's not just a simple pop-up where it's like, oh, this, Gatekeeper thinks this is suspicious. Do you want to run it anyway? It's not like that. You couldn't just, oh, I'm not paying attention to the pop up because I hate those. Anytime it's just a pop up, it's too easy to click the wrong thing.
So you're going to have to jump through some hoops. It's not going to be an
Yep,
accidental click.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So now the last point about this is it's not 100% perfect. Malware has made its way past Apple's checks. So
Yeah.
they don't have a 100% perfect track record, but it's been very rare. They do have a very good track record. Okay, now the Windows approach. It is somewhat similar. They also try to protect you against software that you install outside of an app store. But
Okay.
it's a lot more complex. I'm not going to be able to give you like all the details of it because it's just too big to talk about. But they have put a lot of effort into trying to protect you. It's more
Okay.
complicated. There's more settings. It's I classify it partly because of the complexity and their approach, like less strict uh, than Apple's, which is, I mean, kind of what we'd expect normally. Apple seems to always be the bossiest.
Right.
Um, So provides less protection, but I think it's, from what everything I've seen and experienced, it's a lot better than it has been in the past. So, they are slowly improving on this front. And there's one of the big features of it is called Smart Screen. Um, and anyway, I've included a link if you want to dive more into that. But that's all I want to say about it today. Is
Okay.
I feel like Apple wins pretty definitively on this front as well. But I am grateful for Windows' efforts.
All right. They're making progress. I heard you say that, so we'll take that for somewhat of a W. But that said, there's a reason why I like Apple. Thank you. Shout out.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Okay, so the next point, again, like last time, is the malware that sneaks past your defenses.
yeah.
And the biggest differentiating factor that is impactful to this is basically bugs,
Okay.
because bugs are really the number one way that malware is going to sneak on your computer, is because the hackers, they found a bug that hadn't been fixed yet, and so until it's fixed, then you've got like an opening, a hole in your defenses that they can sneak in. And so they're always searching
Gotcha.
for new bugs. New bugs are always being discovered, and so, and that's why we talk about updating your software regularly to get those bug fixes, because the bad guys are always rushing in to try to get in through those holes before the bugs get fixed.
Right. I actually
Um,
had been holding off on an update, to be honest, and
yeah.
until we did that episode, and I was like, oh crap.
Well,
So I've
but
been
here's the good.
pretty regular with my updates ever since.
Okay, good. Right. Well, and I think we talked about this. If not, I anyway, you can differentiate between security updates and feature updates.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You
Okay.
mentioned that. Right.
So,
Right. There are certain apps that I don't automatically update because they're feature
ah,
related.
well, I was going to say, right, at the app level, that distinction is never present that I've seen. They
Oh,
don't they
really?
don't have different channels. It's only the operating system itself, like iOS, Mac OS, Windows, the core operating system for the
Okay.
device. They have that distinction. I'm glad you raised that question, because unfortunately, right, it would be kind of cool. That would be a wonderful kind of next level to have
Wouldn't
that
that?
done
The
at
app
the
stores
individual app level.
have the
That
apps
would be
let you know if it was
fantastic.
security. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
cool.
but yeah, no, nope, never. I've never ever seen that for any app, honestly. Just
Okay.
yeah, that's a
Well,
great
there you go.
idea. I love
There's
that. I love that thinking, actually. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's a good thought, and a good distinction too, because I didn't make that clarification, so there's probably confusion about that, honestly. So
Well,
okay, so
hopefully that's what I'm here for. Is to
oh yeah, yeah. No, I think you do a great job. Keep keep me on track. So uh,
Okay,
so back to the
go ahead.
bugs,
Yep, going
right?
back to the bugs. That's what I was gonna say. Yep, going back to the bugs.
So, and now we're getting to the answer about the Patch Tuesday, because here's a little bit of interesting history that will tell you how long Windows has been having a lot of bugs.
Uh-oh.
In 2003, Microsoft introduced the concept of Patch Tuesday. Okay.
Oh man.
Yeah. This is the day they would release bug fixes on, so they could provide a predictable schedule, that companies can plan on, because especially back then, updating a lot of times required rebooting, which is a lot less true now, thankfully, but even now still is required in many cases on Windows. And Apple, actually, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Apple, you have to reboot plenty as well. Um, but and Patch Tuesday is still going strong today. It's the second Tuesday of each month. They release the most critical updates, is the wording that I read. And the interesting thing, though, so the August from like this month of 2024, there were 89 bugs in Patch Tuesday.
89?
Yeah, and I mean, month after month after month. I mean, that's not like crazy high or anything. I mean, I don't know exactly what
That
the average
seems
is,
like a
but
lot.
I know, I agree. Well, part
I
of
was
so of those
gonna say, why
89,
aren't they? Yeah.
well, it's because they never stop adding features, for one.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, partly it's they're discovering stuff. I mean, sometimes they're very long, like the bugs have been around for a really long time. Sometimes it's because of other changes, though. Like there's lots and lots of newly introduced bugs because they're updating it for new hardware, they're adding new features,
Right.
whatever. There's a
That
million
makes sense.
reasons why new
Okay.
bugs are introduced, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay.
But out of those 89, too, it's kind of interesting because there's six that they
Yeah.
call actively exploited, where there's like actual documentation. There are hackers out there that these aren't just theoretical holes in the defenses, but there are six that they know that they've been taking advantage of people with. Yeah,
Oh.
right. Kind of hurts, doesn't it?
Oh. Yeah, that sucks,
Yeah.
to be honest. Dang it.
Yep. And I don't really have a lot to say on the Mac front. They certainly have bugs, but quantity wise, uh, they're just a whole lot less.
Right? Wow.
So yeah, so I would call that an Apple win as well.
I would say so.
Now we're going to move on to the next point, which we did not cover last time, and that is in a public Wi-Fi setting.
Yeah.
So in other words, how does Apple compare to Windows in keeping you safe when you're away from home rather than at
Yeah.
home?
Yeah.
And this is one, right. So the important thing here is when you're in public Wi-Fi, your computer is exposed to all these other computers, whereas at home you're behind your router, and most other computers can't see yours.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's part of where the increased danger comes from. And so when we with computers, there's this notion of like computers are always communicating and talking with each other, right?
Right.
And sometimes but where do those connections get initiated? Is my laptop reaching out to a computer? Like if we want to go visit a website, that means you on your laptop, you're initiating the connection from your laptop to the website computer, right?
Right. Right.
And for most people, most of the time, what you're wanting to do is initiating connections from your computer to other computers, right?
Right. That makes sense.
Especially these days. But for example, one case that I have at home is sometimes I'm helping one of my kids or my wife on their computer, but I'm out in my office or I'm away from home even, and I want to be able to connect to their computer so I can look at what they're seeing and help them directly on their computer. And in that case, I want to be able to initiate a connection, but their computer needs to be able to receive an incoming connection. Right? But anytime we start enabling incoming connections, that opens us up when we're away from home.
To additional threats. Makes sense.
Exactly. Like if we listen at all, if we accept the more kinds of incoming connections we accept, the more, holes or risks anyway we expose ourselves to.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
It makes sense so far. Yep. I'm
Okay.
with you. I'm
So
with you.
this is where we get to the difference between Windows and Mac OS and the feature that Windows has that I wish that Apple had. Windows has built into it the concept of a network type, public and private. And so when you connect, like on Wi-Fi, if you connect to your home Wi-Fi, for example, or your home, if you're Ethernet too, either way,
Yeah.
like a cable, if you connect to that network, you can say that that's a private network, meaning it's your
Right.
home network. It's not public Wi-Fi with all these other random computers, right?
Which it is.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And then when you go and connect to, the Wi-Fi at the airport or the hotel,
Right.
it'll ask you about that. Is this a public or private network?
Oh,
And
cool.
and you can say this is a public network.
Public one.
So there's you trust the devices on that less, basically, is the idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
And like on a public network, I don't want to ever receive any incoming connections on my computer.
Right.
I'd
Right.
just rather say no. I'm not interested in even evaluating it. I just don't trust anything, any incoming connections.
Right. You
Anything I
could
need to
set that
do,
setting and yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
But Mac doesn't have that.
Get with it,
Um,
Mac.
yeah. So the
So
impact for
we're
that.
referring to just like the difference between public and what you're doing at home.
Mm-hmm,
Right.
yeah.
Is the big distinction here. And this is where Windows has made that distinction, whereas Apple has not. Did I get that all correct?
Yep.
Sweet.
And so the way that what that looks like for me specifically is there's there's other examples that I use, but any sharing functionality, as they kind of talk about that, any inbound communication that I want to allow, I either need to just not ever turn on, or
Right.
I have to remember to turn it off when I travel, right?
Right.
Neither of
Right.
which is great. Like I want to be able to turn it on when I want, but I also don't want to have to remember, because that's just another thing to easily
Agree.
overlook.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, we're going to call this a win for Windows.
Nice. They got one.
Yeah, I know we got right. Well, okay, so that brings us to I talked about the our famous software developer. I mean, famous is relative, of course, but he's pretty famous, at least in certain circles. And well, okay. First, I want to say though, like Windows just got a point, right? But
Yeah.
it's obviously, I don't know, it's probably pretty clear by now how lopsided the comparison is, right? In
Right.
favor
That's
of
why I
Apple.
said they finally got one.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
finally got
exactly.
one.
Yeah. And, obviously hearing how much I use Apple, anyway, I'm guessing that some of our listeners, depending on their perspective, they may be suspicious at this point of my objectivity.
You have a
Right?
Windows computer that you said you built for gaming, right?
I do. Right. But, I think it's fair to be suspicious and at least to ask it. It's
Yeah.
in general, in security, I want to encourage suspicion. Right?
All right, so let's be suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of the reason I wanted to bring in this, is because, maybe I'm just an Apple fanboy, right? Who
Right.
can't compare fairly, right?
Right.
So the guy I want to talk about his name is Steve Gibson, and I've referenced him in the podcast he does, Security Now, and
Right.
he's my favorite security expert to listen to, and
Okay.
he's been doing the podcast for 19 years, and he is still a software developer, um, but he likes to write Windows specific software. All his stuff is Windows only, and
Okay.
he's been doing that for, I don't even know how long. Certainly at least as long as the podcast was running. Early days of Windows. And here's, I don't want to speak for him. I love Steve, so I'm not going to try to put words in his mouth too much. But so, Steve, if you ever listen to this, Don't hate me. Here's how I would sum up your perspective, and I hope it's fair. I would say he both loves and hates Windows. He loves using it. He loves building apps for it, but he hates its security. He constantly is complaining about the security of Windows and giving props to Apple's privacy and security approach, despite he's still on a Windows machine. Although I think he's actually still on Windows 7. Uh, he really likes to keep old school. I'm not positive about that, but I'm almost positive. So anyway, that's his perspective, and that means a lot to him. I'm listening to him enough that I trust his opinion a lot on security.
Yeah.
Sometimes we disagree, and sometimes he'll make mistakes, and then some people will write in and he'll correct himself. So he's not perfect by any stretch, but I have a lot of respect for his knowledge and opinions. So
Nice. Nice. Okay.
okay, so that's the last individual point. Now I just want to kind of bring it all together, wrap it up.
Bring it home.
And here's the way I would sum it up: is Apple, I feel like, is the clear winner, over Windows, but
Okay.
for very different reasons than its win over Android. Because, and this is kind of painful to say, but in my opinion, the evidence is clear that Microsoft, they have just an incredibly long history of absolutely horrible security. And the details and specifics of that we haven't even really had time to touch on, and this is going to end up being one of our longest episodes ever. Um, because it's one of those topics for me. I keep hoping that that's going to change, and maybe the CrowdStrike incident will help spur Microsoft more towards that.
Yeah.
Even though it's
Yeah.
not even really, I mean, that wasn't their fault. I'm not saying that, but I'm just thinking that maybe incidents like this will help them to start prioritizing. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, I'm still waiting. And while I'm waiting, and this is true for, well, I never do anything sensitive on my Windows gaming box. Yeah, I game
Yeah.
there, but do I check my bank account? Do I go shopping even? Do I do anything on there? No, because in my opinion, Windows is the absolute worst operating system you can pick for security. Behind Linux, behind Mac OS, behind iOS, behind Android, any mainstream thing you're gonna get. It's just the worst.
That's one summation in a bow.
Yeah. So I that just yeah, happy to talk about it, happy to discuss it, happy to analyze more aspects with different people. But and for what it's worth, we've talked with Kem. He's been on a few episodes. He's our chief
Yeah.
tech geek here at the IHP Academy. He's been a software developer his whole life, just like me, and we've talked about it a lot. And I had him review and checked in with him all this, so I know he's okay with me speaking for him. But he is in full agreement with me on all of this. We have the same rules, same policies when it comes to Windows. So that's for what it's worth. Uh yeah. So any questions or thoughts you want to share before we get to our call to action, Nick?
No, I think you wrapped it up nice and tidy. Like, that was pretty clear. That
Okay.
said, since we're getting to our call to action, I want to give a shout out since it's a listener episode. I
Yeah.
want to give a shout out to a faithful listener who loves our call to actions. Like, he waits for them. So, hey, Justin,
Uh,
this is a huge shout out to you, buddy. Thank you for always listening. We appreciate your support. And this call to action's for you. So, Makani, what's our call to action today, buddy?
well, obviously there's part of me that wants to be like, stop using Windows, but not going to do that. Not going to.
That's good.
No, that's not my call to action. I'm going to do everything I can to help our listeners stay safe on Windows. So we'll talk about we'll be talking about lots of things to do to stay safe on Windows.
Yes.
Because like we talked about last episode too, it's one layer and it's a significant layer, but all hope is not lost.
Okay.
So my call to action instead is actually, we kind of got into it earlier, and that is keep Windows updated. You may not be able to update, all your apps with just security updates, but at least with Windows, get your bug fixes installed as quickly as you can.
Okay.
Meaning turning on automatic updates, at least for the security software, to
Yeah.
reduce your chances, at least, of getting infected with malware. And Windows is actually pretty pushy about the automatic updates.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that if you're a Windows user, like, they're already enabled, you may not have to do anything. Sometimes people do disable them, because they happen so often, they require a reboot and get annoying or whatever. But
Yeah.
so double check that if you don't know. Like, a lot of people might already know, but anyway, that's why I want to make sure that you understand the importance of having automatic security updates on. You can skip the feature updates if you want, because that's where new bugs are introduced anyway. So, uh, but anyway, and I have a link in the show notes for instructions if you have a hard time finding where to do that. But
All right.
so,
Keep updated.
and yeah, we'll have, like I said, we'll definitely talk about lots of other things you can do to stay safe, but we can only fit in one per day, and that's the most fundamental, very straightforward, just one that's not necessarily obviously important. It's kind of like, we were talking about cars earlier, Nick. You
Yeah.
know, car maintenance and service, like bug fixes and doing those is really, it's that basic of a necessity in my book.
Right. Well, and it sounds like this is like getting your oil changed. This is something
Mm-hmm.
with Windows, they've got as we talked about, Patch Tuesday. So get these things updated. If you're going to run these systems, which a lot of people do, you know, and we're going to be here to help, which I'm excited for because even we have multiple laptops in our house that are not MacBook Pros or MacBooks, period. And so I'm excited to see how we can stay safe, and we're going to start doing our automatic updates.
Good. Well, and I recommend that absolutely for Mac OS, iOS, Android as well. Automatic
Perfect.
security updates everywhere you can is a baseline for any device, no matter what. So,
Okay, that's great.
okay. Well,
There
there
you
we
have
go.
it.
That's it for
Woo!
today.
Okay, that's our super simple show today. If you're not a member of the IHP Academy already, please come join us for free. Stop searching the whole internet for answers and never knowing who to trust. Ask us instead. We made it super simple to find us, and it only takes 2 minutes to sign up. Just visit helpmegetsafe.com. Enter your name and your email. You're in. You can also find the link in our show notes. Thank you for joining us, and make it a great day. Bye-bye.